So I'm Jacob Bruce, a partner in New Dawn Solar with my brother. We've been in the solar industry for a little over a decade. We started out pulling wire for my dad's company. Ran an electrical company, and there wasn't really anybody in the solar industry that understood the electrical side of it. And so that's how we got our start, was working for a couple hippies that were selling solar systems.
So, I'm Jonathan Bruce. I'm the Chief Technical Officer of New Dawn Solar, and I enjoy some of what I do.
All right, one thing I'd like to say on my brother, though. He's brilliant at math and a world-class programmer. He was actually the first person in the country, as far as I know, to create a calculator for figuring out ground mounts. It was genius. Really good at designing, understands the code better than most inspectors, and so vital part of the company. So.
We're going to talk about the long-term benefits of solar. One of the main bullet points to discuss is going to be return on investment. So why should a person get a solar system installed, just in general, much less by you?
Okay. Well, it does very much depend on where they are and their location, as far as access to sunlight, but also, are they in the TVA, what power company they have, all that kind of stuff. Mm-hmm. And so, first of all, before going into why they should get solar, I think it's really important to highlight that they need to do the research and they need to find a company that is reputable, that understands all those variables.
Yeah, it's also important to understand what the customer is actually wanting out of the interest in a solar system, because they may have interest in a system, but what is their driving motive behind that interest? Are they trying to save money? Are they trying to save the ecology around them? What's their actual goal? Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I mean, we've seen pretty much every reason under the book to get solar. Some people get it because it's honestly too expensive to get the power company to run a line out, to their house. So they want something off grid.
Right.
Maybe they want to save, the environment. Maybe they want to save, return on investment, get the tax credits, get rid of their electric bill, good return on investment, right? And then, there's a few other reasons. Some of it's just security. Electrical prices keep going up, taxes on that kilowatt hour. Mm-hmm. Usage keeps going up. Just general prices keep going up. And then on top of that, we've got a heavier and heavier load on the grid. And so, it's becoming more and more vulnerable. And
in many places unreliable.
Right. And so we get more outages for longer periods of time.
Right.
So, there's more to an investment and why you should get solar than just saving money or environmental reasons.
The next bullet point was going to be the longevity and reliability of solar panels as an investment, and why solar insurance makes them stereotypically cost so much, because panels literally last for over 100 years. They last an absurdly long amount of time. It's just that the efficiency drop-off is huge, and certain areas have environmental damage. So
also a lot of times what they're counting as the lifetime of the panel is its tax life, or its insurable life.
Yeah.
And so you see that a lot. Or
its practical life as an ongoing investment. So obviously, if the efficiency drops down below 17%, it's no longer a worthwhile investment to take on. But since you've already paid into it, it is worth keeping. But they consider that the life of the panel.
Understood.
Yeah. So there's a lot that goes into that.
Yeah. A lot of those nuances really come out when you look at solar farms.
Mm-hmm. Yes.
And there's a plethora of variables that go into it, but I don't think that's, we could do another video talking in a lot more depth on solar farms, but I would say that, most of our audience right now is going to want to know a lot more tailored to a homeowner. Cabin in the woods, maybe their business, something like that. Mm-hmm. So I would actually like to do it another time where we can actually show the background, our numbers on our design software, and show them, we do irradiance mapping, the shading analysis, all of the electrical inefficiencies, and we're very, very accurate on our designs.
Get technical with them.
Yeah, and then also on the financial projections, we really get technical with those, and figure out every variable from inflation to all of the tariffs and taxes related to each of the power companies.
Okay.
But for now, as a general rule, I think we see with a homeowner, we see about a 13-year ROI, a payback period. And I don't remember what the IRR is.
Internal rate of return.
I know what it is. I don't know what the time period or what the percentage is.
Ah.
I know it's better than real estate. Has a better IRR than real estate. So we're really going to have to dive into those numbers at a certain point.
It's a good long-term investment.
I know what the
Yeah,
LCOE
definitely.
is.
The what?
Levelized cost of electricity.
Mm-hmm.
So that's effectively how much electricity would have to be costing in order for this to be a neutral investment that makes you or saves you nothing.
Mm-hmm. Right.
And normally that ends up being around 3 to 4 cents a kilowatt hour, which is significantly less than any supply of electricity in the States. So it's always a worthwhile investment,
Right.
even if it's not necessarily an excellent investment.
Yeah. In Kentucky, there's less local incentives, and they're getting rid of a 1-for-1 net metering in a lot of regions.
Mm-hmm.
So, but even with that, it's still a good investment.
Right, it's still worth doing. It still saves you money overall.
Yeah.
You're guaranteed to use electricity until you die.
Yeah,
Right.
And the cost of electricity is only going to continue to increase.
Right.
So
Production matters, and having some of that production in your home is useful.
The other thing is, too, is, if you're going to pay money towards taxes, you get a tax credit, 30%.
Mm-hmm.
For some reason, I wanted to say 33, but we've been doing this a while.
yeah,
So you get a federal tax credit of 30% for the next 10 years. And so you get to take what you would have given to the government and put that towards your own home, your own
Right.
security.
yeah.
And then let's say you get a solar system at 30, 43, it's totally paid off, and you never paid an electric bill again.
I do also want to point out that's one of the very extremely rare cases where you can literally see your tax dollars at work. Your tax
Right.
dollars have actually brought something about that benefited you in some way.
Right.
Where normally your tax dollars go into this black hole, and somehow through managerial positions and people making decisions outside of your understanding, they decide that X amount goes to this and X amount goes to that,
Right.
and you don't really ever have a hand in it. But
Right.
when it's going onto your own home and that 30% is being saved in taxes, well, now you actually get to see that 30% on your house saving you money, doing
Right.
something good.
And average escalation rate, which would be the annual increase in power, the cost of power per kilowatt hour, is 4.3% in Kentucky, right?
Yeah, it's anywhere between 4 and 5% in most states.
Yeah.
And it fluctuates, obviously, but
Well, yeah, and it's not 4.3% every year. Like
that's just kind of on average, it ends up being that.
we had one year it was an 11% spike.
Yeah.
And then another one that gets people too is head blanked on what it's called. The charge, the amount.
Fuel adjustment clause.
Fuel adjustment clause. Thank you.
Yeah.
Yeah. So the fuel adjustment clause allows them to increase or lower the cost
Without
per kilowatt hour.
technically increasing the rate.
Yep.
Yeah.
And so I think it was last year, a bunch of people were calling us up saying, my bill went up to, $400, $500, and we usually pay $250.
Right.
And we took a look at it. It's like, yeah, it's fuel adjustment charge. If the cost of fuel for the power company goes up, then the cost of electricity goes up for you.
Yep.
And they don't have to raise the rate to be able to do that.
And worse yet, a lot of times they'll actually estimate what your usage is going to be for a month rather than go out and read it. Or if they didn't
Right.
get to your meter that month,
Right.
they'll just say, well, you probably used about this amount. And if they underestimated it, then it's going to be, when they read it next, it's going to be even more power attributed to that fuel adjustment clause or to whatever other adjustment there's been made.
Yeah.
And you're going to be way overpaying.
Actually, we had a few solar customers that we had put the monitoring on it prior to the solar. And even after, if maybe it didn't take care of the whole bill, they just wanted like, say, 25-50% of it taken care of. And we were able to catch the power company on billing incorrectly.
Yep.
Because their meters are accurate from 3 plus or minus percent, and ours is 0.5 plus or minus percent. And technically at 3%, that doesn't actually qualify for being able to use it to bill. So the power company's meters are kind of right there on the line of even accurate enough to bill by.
And those are specifically the digital meters, because the analog meters are almost a perfect accuracy.
Right. Yeah, the digital meters and they're switching everything to digital.
They are.
Yeah. Yeah, partly because they want they want to be able to have more complex rates.
Yeah, that's a
Which is
big part of it.
frustrating.
Yeah. But they also want to lower their own internal costs, because if they don't have to send somebody out to turn off your power, that
Right.
saves them a lot of money.
It does. Yeah, which is reasonable. I understand
Yeah,
that.
that makes sense.
Yeah.
One of the next points was that you can actually purchase more of your freedom electrically with solar. So speaking to that, like, how does it increase your capability to not have to rely on a government entity whenever you're purchasing solar? I mean, you have your own electrical. You're not having to rely on a power company. You're not having to rely on an outside force for something that is a necessity in the modern
Right.
era.
Well, I wouldn't necessarily classify power companies as a government entity, even though they're heavily regulated by the government and sometimes owned by government corporations.
TVA.
But also, right, TVA, yeah. But also in Kentucky, there's also a lot of co-ops. And so those are
That's
actually
true.
owned by the people.
Yeah.
So that's actually kind of neat. Of course, every state's different. Like when we went to Texas, something that was really interesting is they said when you move there, you choose between, like, let's say 3 different power companies and decide which one you want to go with. Where here, we can't even put solar on someone's house and then bill them for the usage, because each power company has territories and you're not allowed to infringe on that.
Yep.
And
Governmentally mandated territories.
right. So the only way you choose your power company here is by just moving. Yeah. As far as reliability, I mean, solar panels last somewhat indefinitely. There's certainly differences in quality.
There are. And that depends heavily on the style of the panel. Because if you're using, say, a monocrystalline, that's going to last a long time because it's all one piece, right?
Right.
And it's going to be very efficient. Where the polycrystalline, they might not last quite as long. I mean, you're still going to have them both lasting technically indefinitely, but the efficiency is going to last longer with the monocrystalline. But if you're using a thin film, that efficiency drops fast. And that's
Very fast,
because it's not made out of glass and metals and elements like this is. It's made out of thin layers of plastic with powders between and various compounds. And that plastic breaks down and those compounds break down and air can get in and really screw things up when things start oxidizing.
Right.
So they can be up to 40% efficient at times when they're fresh out of the factory. But as soon as sunlight hits them, they start breaking down.
Well, and that's one of the things. A lot of people were really interested in the solar shingles,
Right.
but they have a lot of issues of efficiency, and then also production. Cost per watt is much higher. Yeah, so there's a lot of issues with those.
Yeah, anytime you start working with a lot of compound materials in a PV module, you end up having various technical difficulties.
Yeah, I think the majority of the market, though, is going to monocrystalline, because
Yeah, it is.
the efficiencies are going up, and the technology is getting better for slicing the silicon.
Right, yeah, getting thinner layers that are more consistent and getting better seals on them to keep the oxygen out.
Yeah, there's one company that's experimenting with basically filling it all with gas before sealing it, and so it gets all of the oxygen out. And they're claiming they'll be able to get, much lower degradation rate over a long period of time.
Yeah, that makes sense.
So, because these are sill fabs that we're sitting in front of here, and they've got a 30-year production guarantee. And so, what is that? A drop of 8% after 30 years? I'd have to look at the spec
I don't
sheet.
remember exactly.
I don't even know if it was 8%.
I don't think it was. That doesn't sound right. They have a 20 to 21%. I think it's 21% for these silfabs, percent efficiency starting out.
But I mean the drop in production is what I should say.
Right. Well, the drop in production is a drop in efficiency.
Obviously,
And that's based on how much silicon oxide there is on the surface of your silicon wafer. And the oxide only exists because oxygen is getting in.
Right.
And oxygen will get in. It's a small atom, and the sun, when it interacts with it, is going to allow it to bond. And that's a slow, steady process over time.
But these so these are silfab 400s in 30 years. At worst case scenario, they're producing 360 watts after 30 years.
Right.
That's still a good amount of production.
That's a lot of power. You can still get panels set at 360 watts, and they're considered a good panel.
Yeah, and that's at 10%. That would be like, yeah. All their studies are showing that they're getting better than that.
Right.
So, yeah, but if you replace it with gas, so there's no air to oxidize it,
Yeah.
that'd be sweet. You know, a big one too that goes into sustainability and return on investment would be the company that installs it. Do they know what they're doing?
Right.
So we saw that with a company that we were installing for, and we won't name them, but there's several of them.
If you're watching this, you know who you are.
Right. Yeah. And, you know, they did thousands of installs per year. We did a couple hundred for them. Usually the more complicated ones they wanted us on. And the lawsuits after a couple of years started rolling in on every system except for the ones we installed. And we saw videos that this company showed us where the rail with the microinverters and everything was just, you could just move them back and forth. They were just flopping. And the company that had installed them had not put in any flashing. I don't remember if they used caulk, but it doesn't matter. They didn't even hit the truss.
Yeah.
And so they just drilled bolts
Right into the sheathing.
right into the sheathing.